This is BBC News, the headlines. King Charles makes a surprise visit to fans waiting on the Mall with the Prince and Princess of Wales. The World Health Organization says COVID-19 no longer represents a global health emergency and therefore represents a major step towards ending the pandemic. In England, the Conservatives suffer significant council losses in local election results. And the Wagner mercenary group posts a social media video of its leader berating Russia for not sending the force enough ammunition. Next, the Conservative Party in England has suffered significant council losses in local elections. The BBC has projected that based on today's results, if all of Britain voted, that Labour would have a 9-point lead over the Conservatives, making it the largest lead the Labour Party have recorded on this particular measure since losing power in 2010. Well, let's go live now to our political correspondent, Rob Watson. Hi there, Rob. So what's all this mean?
Hi there. Well, I think we have to be a bit careful not to get too carried away. These are, after all, local elections where voter turnout is so much lower, almost half of what it is in general elections, and not all the votes are counted. And if I add the third proviso, the third caveat, it's that, look, you know, a general election is still some way off. It doesn't have to be held until January 2025. But right, with all of that out the way, all the caveats, I think what we can clearly see from the votes that have been cast and from this the vote share projection that's been done, that the Conservatives are really up against it, and Labour and the other opposition parties can feel that they're doing pretty well. I think for as far as the Labour Party is concerned, yes, they have this lead. Would they like it to be bigger? Yeah, absolutely they would, because I think to be sure of being in the sort of territory that they experienced, for example, in 1997, they would probably want an even bigger lead. And if you talk to Labour, they think, yes, we're doing well, yes, the voters are fed up with the Conservatives, but we still need to explain to the British people exactly how things would be better, stroke different, under us.
OK, Rob, thank you very much for that. We'll speak to you a little later on.
We will have plenty more Coronation news from here at Buckingham Palace, but let's get a check on the rest of the day's news. Lewis is in the studio.
Christian, thanks so much for that. And of course, we'll be back live at Buckingham Palace a little later. Now, though, in England, the ruling Conservative Party has suffered significant losses in local election results. The BBC's projected that based on today's results, if all Britain had voted yesterday, Labour would have a 9-point lead over the Conservatives, making it the largest lead Labour Party have recorded on our measure since losing power back in 2010. Our political correspondent, Ian Watson, has the latest.
Friends, it's great to have Keir on the pier.
The Labour leader claimed it was the Conservatives who were all at sea. 20 years of Tory rule in Medway and Kent ended overnight, and Sir Keir Starmer claimed his party was cruising to victory nationally.
Make no mistake, we are on course for a Labour majority at the next general election.
He says he's changed Labour, and its electoral rebirth is based not just on the number of seats won, but the geographical spread. Labour took control of Plymouth and Swindon in the south. It regained its traditional territory of Stoke in the West Midlands and won control of Blackpool in northwest England.
Going down here.
But there's a further concern for the Conservatives. The Lib Dems are doing well in areas Labour can't reach. With a general election drawing closer, their crowning glory was taking Windsor and Maidenhead from the Tories.
3, 2, 1.
We knew we were going to do quite well, but I'll be frank with you, we didn't realise we'd do quite as well as we've done. The Liberal Democrats have shown that we can now beat the Conservatives, and we're actually coming back in our traditional heartlands too.
And the Greens have taken majority control of a council for the first time, unseating the Conservatives in mid-Suffolk. They made significant gains in Folkestone and East Hertfordshire, also at the Tories' expense. Amid a cost of living crisis, Conservative staffers were probably grateful for this food delivery. Rishi Sunak promised to deliver policy promises too.
What people want us to do is focus on their priorities. Halving inflation, growing the economy, reducing debt, cutting waiting lists and stopping the boats. Those are the country's priorities.
The BBC's projected national share of the vote is an estimate of how the parties would have performed if the whole country had voted. It puts Labour 9 points ahead of the Conservatives, a bigger gap in any local election since the party lost power nationally in 2010. Even before the final results have been declared, the parties have been indulging in their own version of a post-match analysis. The Conservatives have been pointing out areas where their opponents have been doing less well, while Labour has been arguing it now has enough political momentum to take it to a general election victory. But in truth, it's difficult to be that definitive.
Yes, Labour have made significant seat gains as compared with what was a poor performance by them in 2019, as well as the poor performance by the Conservatives. But if you actually compare the results with last year, Labour's share of the vote, their own share of the vote, is actually, on the sample of results we've got so far, and it is only a sample, is pretty much unchanged.
Rishi Sunak is meeting world leaders ahead of the Coronation. After today's results, it's perhaps not surprising he wants to focus on global, not local politics. Ian Watson, BBC News.
And we can go now to our political correspondent, David Wallace Lockhart. David, you've been digging into the numbers for us.
That's right, Lewis. And the best way to get an overall picture is to look at the change we're seeing in councillors. So I'll bring that up and we can start there. Now, this is a comparison to 2019. Just for a bit of context, in 2019, the Conservatives had a very bad set of local elections. Labour didn't have a great time either. The Lib Dems did quite well. So on changes to the 2019 local elections, Labour up at this point by 430 seats. The Conservative is down by almost 800 and the Lib Dems up by 275, and they were already starting from quite a high bar. Also some significant gains for the Greens, who are up by 178. What does this mean for changes in council numbers? Well, Labour have gained 17, the Conservatives have lost almost 40, the Lib Dems up by 7, the Greens up by 1, and we'll have more on that later. But let's delve into a few seats that tell perhaps a bit of a story of this election so far. So we'll start on the Kent coast, looking at Medway, and this was somewhere that Labour managed to take from Conservative control today. Now, this had been a Conservative council since 2003. Labour haven't controlled it since 1998, but that's all changed now, and we saw in Ian's report, this is where Sir Keir Starmer chose to go to celebrate. And an interesting thing to note about Medway is look here at the EU referendum result in 2016. 64% leave. Now, we know in the years after Brexit, the Labour Party really struggled in areas that had backed Brexit, but perhaps that's starting to change now. A very pro-Brexit area, but a good result for Labour. Looking there, their seats up by 11 compared to 2019. The Conservatives down by 13. Now, we can go to Berkshire, Windsor and Maidenhead. Slightly different story here because it's the Lib Dems that have done particularly well at the expense of the Conservatives. This has been a Conservative council since 2007. A very significant local MP, former Prime Minister Theresa May, of course, a Conservative MP, but this council has gone Liberal Democrat. They needed 21 seats for a majority. They got 22. And we can look at what's happened in the change of seats. Conservative vote has collapsed down by 16, the Lib Dems up by 13. And these two seats here really do illustrate the problem that Rishi Sunak has, because he's facing fights on two fronts. There are seats, possibly pro-Brexit seats like Medway and Kent, where the Labour Party seems to be making significant inroads, and there are prosperous traditional Conservative areas like Windsor and Maidenhead where the Lib Dems are threatening the Conservative Party. And we'll also have a quick mention for Mid Suffolk. Now, this just outside Ipswich had been a Conservative loss to no overall control in 2019. No one had a majority here, but going back previous elections, the Conservatives did very well. It's now a Green council. It's the first majority they have ever had on a council in England, so quite a significant moment for the Green Party there. And what's happened? Well, the Conservative vote has shot down. They've lost 10 seats compared to 2019. The Greens, who really targeted this seat very hard, have done well. They've made 12 gains, and therefore the Greens get their first majority on a council. More results still coming in, more councils still being declared, so we'll keep across that throughout the evening.
David, thank you very much for that, for talking us through the numbers there. Right, let's take a look at the raw politics of all this, I suppose. Ione Wells is standing by. Hi, Ione. So where do you think this leaves all the parties now?
Well, I think the overall picture that we are increasingly getting as we now have more and more results that have come in is that Conservatives branding this as a disappointing day for them is probably a little bit of an understatement. I think they have now lost nearly 800 seats overall. They are potentially on course to lose 1,000 or more, which was discussed in Conservative circles as kind of a bad result for them prior to this election. I think in terms of opposition parties, it's basically a pretty good result for all of them in a way. Labour are certainly highlighting what they feel as successes in winning a kind of broad spectrum of different types of seats that would be key areas to try and win if they wanted to make inroads at a next general election. So they've won seats like Medway, but also seats like Stoke in the Midlands as well, but also seats in the south like Plymouth. So they are pointing to that sort of range of geography as a positive sign for them. The Liberal Democrats particularly happy today. They say they've exceeded their expectations of gaining some of those seats in the south of England, particularly like Windsor and Maidenhead, which again they say puts them on track to potentially kind of eat into more of those kind of traditionally conservative heartland seats in southern England as well. And also Greens celebrating today for gaining control of Mid Suffolk, the first council that they will have overall control over. So I think in terms of opposition parties, all broadly happy today. I think one thing, though, that some in Labour may be contemplating is whether the results today are enough to make them confident that they would potentially, as polls have suggested over recent months, be on course to win a next general election. As the BBC's kind of prediction and projections showed, at the moment, if these results were to be sort of replicated across Britain and people were to behave in the same way, it would give Labour a 9-point lead. It doesn't necessarily suggest that Labour are making kind of significant more gains than they did in the last set of local elections. And similarly, the Conservatives not quite back at record lows that they have seen in the past. So I think both sides will potentially still feel that there isn't a sort of clear-cut sort of definite picture of where this could go in, potentially about a year's time or whenever we do get the next general election.
Lots to ponder. Ione, thanks for that. That's it. I'm Lewis Vaughan Jones. This is BBC News.